Hi, welcome to week 5 of our language and literacy class. This week is all about word study and building fluency for students. So, word study came about as a reaction to not just using spelling lists and having spelling quizzes, although that is still in practice today, having children just learn their words. But word study is more in depth than just having a list of words. It's using the word families and teaching the same types of onset and rhyme, or sometimes you're using suffixes or prefixes, and or you could be learning how to show past tense for words. And so what you're doing is you're studying the way that things are put together in the English language. So you're trying to develop those patterns in our students. So how do you teach spelling words? Many teachers teach by giving students a list on Monday and a test on Friday with practice in between. This type of drill and practice has earned traditional spelling instruction a reputation for being boring. Although some children love it. I know I used to love that. Some children feel like there's no big picture and no ultimate goal makes it all the more tedious. As soon as one spelling list is tested, another list takes its place. And oftentimes children will study for a test and then promptly forget everything once the test is over. So now there's an alternative to the traditional spelling instruction, and it's called word study, which is not based on the random memorization of words. A word study program is a cohesive approach that addresses word recognition, vocabulary, phonics, as well as spelling. Word study provides students with opportunities to investigate and understand the patterns in words. Knowledge of these patterns means that students needn't learn to spell one word at a time. Take, for example, the difference between hard C as in cat and soft C as in cell. After collecting many words containing the letter C, students discover that C is usually hard when followed by consonants, as in clue and crayon, and the vowels A, O, and U, as in cat, caught, and cut. In contrast, C is usually soft when followed by I, E, and Y, as in circus, celery, and cycle. Of course, for every rule, there are exceptions that threaten the rule. Students learn, though, that spelling patterns exist and that these patterns help to explain how to spell, read, and write words. Word study is also designed to build word knowledge that can be applied to both reading and spelling. Because it is closely tied to reading instruction, it's also developing students' abilities in phonics, word recognition, and vocabulary. So how is word study taught? Well, there are distinct stages in students' spelling development. Students at different stages attend to and represent different features in their spelling. Word study is based on the notion that where a student is in his or her spelling development can serve as a guide for instruction. At the start of a word study program, teachers use a spelling inventory to determine which stage of spelling development each student is at, and then groups students for instruction. Once the groups are created, teachers develop differential instruction based on the stages of development each group of student has achieved. Instruction has to be deliberately sequenced by the teacher so that students will get instruction that will propel their development. Teachers select a group of words that demonstrate a particular spelling pattern, and then sequence those patterns to match their children's development. Because the pace of children's progression through the stage varies, rarely would all the students in a class be studying the same list of words. So to implement word study effectively, teachers and students alike must become word detectives, engaged in an ongoing attempt to make sense of word patterns and their relationship to one another. Spelling rules are not dictated by the teacher for students to memorize. Rather, spelling patterns and generalizations are discovered by students. Word study is an approach to spelling instruction that moves away from a focus on memorization. The approach reflects what researchers have discovered about the alphabetic pattern and meaning layers of English orthography. Teachers use a variety of hands-on activities, often called word work, to help students actively explore these layers of information. When studying the alphabetic layer, students examine the relationship between letters and sounds. They learn to match single letters and pairs of letters, for example, ch, to specific sounds, and in doing so, to create words. When students study the pattern layer, they look beyond single or paired letter sounds to search for larger patterns that guide the groupings of letters. For example, the CVC words. Studying the meaning layer helps students to understand how the English spelling system can directly reflect the semantic relationships across related words. For example, students come to understand that the second vowel in composition is spelled with an O because it is related to compose. Examining each layer of the orthography helps students to see the regularities, patterns, and derivations in English words, how words work in our writing system. Word study also teaches students how to use this word knowledge strategically to support their spelling attempts during writing activities and to help them decode unfamiliar words while reading. The primary goal of word study is to support students' development of a working knowledge of the orthography, knowledge that students can apply as they are reading and writing. So, there are a few tips that you can use for implementing word study. Tip 1, assess your students' word knowledge using multiple assessment tools. So before you can craft a systematic word study program, you have to determine what your students know about the alphabetic pattern and meaning layers of the orthography. It doesn't make sense to teach students the R-controlled vowel pattern if they don't understand the alphabetic principle. Assessment will inform you of what your students already know and don't yet know, which guides your instruction. Assessment always guides instruction. We found that two kinds of assessments proved most informative: informal spelling inventories and analyses of students' independent writing. So there's a primary spelling inventory or the elementary spelling inventory to assess students' word knowledge at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year. Not only did these assessments help us to determine what each child knew about the orthography, but also the results were particularly useful in grouping children homogeneously for small group instruction. There's kind of two camps on grouping. Some people believe that you should always be doing heterogeneous grouping, and some people believe that you should do homogeneous groupings. The fact of the matter is that studies prove that if you do homogeneous groupings, it does work, but you need to make sure that they're not fixed. So children can move from group to group based upon their abilities. So once they move out of a certain ability, they should be able to move into the next group. So as long as their groups are not fixed, it works. So in order to make sure that you are keeping up with where they are, you need to do periodic assessment. And you need to have, of course, high quality instruction and lots of reading and writing. With that, students' word knowledge is continuously progressing. And so when you are using students' independent writing as an ongoing assessment tool, that will show you what you need to know. If you continuously review their journal writing or writing workshop pieces to document whether they are spelling correctly or misspelling. And once you find out what they're misspelling, use that as a target lesson. So, using a homogeneous or homogeneous small group approach to instruction. Homogeneous means the same. So if you're grouping children based upon ability grouping, you're grouping them in a homogeneous small group. So if you try to do a whole group lesson, the kids who are reading up here are going to be bored if you're targeting your lower reading group. If you're targeting your middle reading group, your lower group is not going to know what's happening, and your top group is still going to be bored. So you want to make sure that you are grouping according to where their abilities lie. Teachers also need to make sure that they are carving out time to prepare for word study instruction. We have 45 minutes every day in our classroom, and I know that that's pretty typical in an elementary class to do word study. We do word study and silent reading. So when all of my my older kids are doing their silent reading, which they long for every day because they love to read, that's when I'm working with my level 1 group. We call them the Beginning Readers Club. And so I play games with them. We do sight words games. We do phonics games. We do all kinds of things, some of which you'll see in these videos that I've uploaded for you. So I try to make sure that I am not boring my older and more efficient readers with the fun games that my beginning readers love. So I'm letting everyone get what they need and not lagging people down. But you have to invest sufficient time preparing for that daily instruction and word work. It's hard though, because you have to make sure that all the materials are ready. So another tip is to teach word knowledge, not just words. What do these words mean? Use them in sentences. So students learn to spell a lot of words through word study lessons, but if you are making sure that they have experiences with those words, that goes a lot farther. For instance, if you have a field trip, that's a shared experience. Write about it. Use those words to launch your word study. So if you are, like for instance, we just had a field trip where we walked down on Cedar River. It was on a Saturday, and whoever wanted to come could come, and we were looking at salmon running up the river. And the day after, well, not the day after, but the Monday afterwards, we had a shared writing experience where children got to see me do a think aloud in my writer's workshop, and I inventively spelled all of the words that they helped raise their hand, and they helped share my writing by telling me, oh, and we saw this, oh, and we saw this. So it was a shared experience and then a shared writing project that then they all got to use to launch their own writing. And they could copy if they wanted to, or they could write their own thoughts. But it was a great way to introduce vocabulary and spelling and all of these fun things that teachers try to slip in there, but it didn't feel like we were teaching spelling. It was just a fun activity that everyone was excited to share because they had been on the field trip and they had a lot of things to say about it. So using meaningful context to make sure that you're teaching vocabulary, not just lists of words that don't necessarily mean anything. So word study can mean a lot of things. We've got word walls. We've got I don't have word walls because I don't believe in decorating the classroom too much. I like to keep things simple and beautiful. And if you wouldn't have a word wall in your home, then I'm not going to have a word wall in my classroom. But we do have little dictionaries, and we keep track of words that we learn. And I also want to make sure that if children have access to words throughout the classroom, then they are able to help learn how to spell or help themselves learn how to spell things. But word walls, I think they're great, but we don't necessarily have a place for them in our school. So word walls are good, but we also have our word work journals, which children, they write all of their word study words in their word work journal. Plus, we have to engage students in extensive real reading and writing. So it's recommended that children get daily, extended, authentic reading and writing activities where children are encouraged to read and to compose texts on topics of their choosing. So, for example, one morning when Diane's first graders were excitedly talking about the Bengals finally winning a football game, Diane encouraged her students to write about the winning touchdown in their journals. We watched as the children used the strategies they had learned to spell the football players' names. When Derek announced that he was going to sound out Hushmanzada, Emily said, "No way," and began to look for the name in print around the room. Brad suggested that a newspaper would have it, and Diane agreed that students could read the paper that evening with their parents or look online. This writing activity provided a context for examining students' use of word study instruction, but that was not necessarily the primary goal. The goal was to give students plenty of opportunities to use what they have learned. They also knew that meaningful, sustained reading and writing experiences support spelling development. And that in turn, spelling knowledge supports reading and writing development. As I've said multiple times, reading and writing are recursive, which means that they aid and abet each other. So the more children read, the better they can write. The more they read, the better spellers they are. The more they write, the better readers they are. It's a cycle. So that is my spiel on word study and fluency. I hope you enjoy the videos that are to follow and you get a lot out of it. I hope that you can use them in your classrooms right away. All right, thanks, bye.